everyone. This is Brianne Amico.
Hope all is well. I'm Ava Adams.
And I'm Tessah Stevens, and thanks for joining us.
We're here for connecting and supporting people,
Sharing relatable moments,
Always encouraging and always growing. We're
practically.
social work.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another week here on Practically Social Work. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty sensitive topic, but a pretty important topic, and that is assisted suicide, or what we would rather call it, which is death with dignity. I would like to open this up to Tessah. We're going to start with our first question here.
So what is assisted suicide is our first question, or death with dignity. And the answer to that really is when somebody is at a point in their life, whether there's a terminal illness or other reasons that we'll get into, where medical intervention steps in to end a life in a way that is compassionate, painless, and it gives a person autonomy over the choice over the end of their life and how that happens. Another good question that would lead off of that is there a difference between assisted suicide and assisted dying?
I was just going to ask it. It kind of sounds like assisted dying. What is the difference?
So my interpretation is, assisted dying, I would say, is like if somebody has 6 months left to live or less. So then you're helping them. They're already dying. There's no question they're dying. The dying is imminent. And then assisted suicide, it's more open to interpretation how long they have, or there could be other reasons that they're choosing to end their life. As Tessah said, there's like other reasons besides a terminal illness. So that's kind of my interpretation on that.
Thank you. That's really
Right.
helpful. There are a lot of different situations where life is not really an option. So,
Yeah.
could you maybe shine some light and give us a situation where that would be, a
Yeah.
benefit?
So I guess I don't really want to say maybe that it would be a benefit, because really it's just super like loose and open to interpretation. But I'll give you an example. I watched a documentary by Louis Theroux, and it was on death with dignity. And there were, one case where a gentleman had cancer, again, terminal, 6 months, kind of black and white. And then there was another case where there was a woman, she had an illness, and I can't remember exactly what it was. I want to say maybe like sclerosis or something. She needed help with daily living skills, right? She needed help in and out of bed, toileting, things like that. And she was in her home, and she was no longer able to take care of herself in her home. And her husband had recently passed away. And her choices were pretty much go to a nursing home, which she wasn't going to be able to afford. She just couldn't afford it, or assisted suicide. So she had this illness that was going to eventually kill her. However, it wasn't considered terminal. She could have lived for months. She could have lived for years. Whatever state she was in, I can't remember. I believe it was Oregon, but I'm not positive. It did allow her to choose that option. And as she said, she didn't want to be a burden on the system. She didn't want to go into like a state-funded nursing home where she wasn't sure the type of care she was going to get. And really, her husband passed away, and that was, her person. She didn't want to be here anymore. So that's kind of a really gray area, ethically. Does she have the right to choose to do that when she's really not like imminently dying?
So, like, to stem off of that, though, it reminds me of, I think the majority of people knew who Robin Williams was, right?
Mhm.
Right. He was a huge part of childhood in every movie, funny, just humble guy. He had Lewy body dementia, which
Right.
apparently incredibly painful, much like MS is. And like especially now with like DEA cracking down on like chronic pain doctors and everything, when people don't have choice for opiates anymore, for chronic pain issues, having chronic pain to the point where you cannot participate. You can't do anything, everything you do, every step, every move, every turn is physically painful. Like your nerves are just working incorrectly.
Hmm.
I have a
Yeah.
question, Tessa. So we've all given medical reasons why, we would utilize assisted suicide or death with dignity. But what about mental health? What about
Yeah.
non-physical troubles
I,
and challenges?
I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this. Mental health can get to the point where it is physically painful. When your mental health is so bad, other parts of your body start shutting down. There's study after study that says, stress correlates with like heart, lung, liver functions. It contributes to autoimmune diseases. Chronic mental health illness can lead to physical health problems, but in the same sense, this is just personal opinion. I don't think it should be a quick decision for people with mental health illness because we are approaching new treatment, but I don't think it should be off the table yet. I mean, working in the mental health field, you see people who are going to different forms of treatment for 10, 15, 20 years. They've made how many attempts themselves. They've tried this treatment, they've tried that treatment. And I'm not saying that that's what I want to see for them, but that's not my choice either. Of course, I want to see them live. We have the suicide hotline. It's there for people who want to live, but if it becomes so physical, I can't imagine, having something going on and becomes so physically painful. You know what I mean?
Well,
Um,
my concern, and just like you said, these are my personal opinions. My concern would be, in some cases, people that have mental health diagnoses are not of sound mind and cannot make decisions that are healthy for them at certain moments. Maybe, maybe they can make decisions sometimes depending on the person. But my concern is that, you know, if a person would make the wrong decision due to their mental health status.
right.
What do you think, Brianne?
I think there just has to be parameters. There has to be guidelines, even for death with dignity in a pretty cut and dry medical case. I think there still has to be guidelines. I don't really necessarily know exactly what they look like in the case of mental health. Perhaps it's like they have to be inpatient treatment for something and they have to try a certain amount of treatments. Like I said, I'm not sure what it would look like, but I think you have to have kind of exhausted all other resources. So,
I think that's kind of where some areas are going. It's like a long process and it's constant evaluations repeatedly. And it's like a number of doctors before,
right.
like it's not like a, 2 months later, this is what's
Yeah.
decided, like years later. I want to add on to this is I feel like I'm playing devil's advocate because at the same time, it almost feels like how we treat women who need abortions and it has to go through all these lawyers and doctors before they have access to it. You know what I mean? It's just like one of those things where it's like, are we taking away or are we helping when we have that many people involved?
Yeah.
It reminds me of when people go for geriatric surgery or geriatric surgery. They'll make the patient lose 50 to 100 pounds before the surgery. And it's like, well, if they can do that, then they may not need the surgery, which is why they're there in the first place. They may not be able to do that. So that just seems really like if I was in this situation where I was seeking out assisted suicide and then I was told that I'd have to stay in a program for a year, that would be very daunting and I would not want to hear that. So
Yeah, and I guess another side of that too is if that's one of the if that's a guideline that they have, will that person just, you know, choose to end their life without the assistance of a physician if they have to kind of go through all these tasks.
Right. And that at that point in time, we risk people hurting themselves because their suicide attempt it wasn't a completed suicide.
Right.
Just
So
like
then
with abortions, just this, the same analogy made, the same thing.
Yeah.
So many women hurt themselves.
Yes. And,
Question is, should assisted suicide be legal then?
Yeah. And like, it's just so hard because there's so much gray area. Like for me personally, I feel like if somebody is in a significant amount of pain, they definitely have a terminal illness, like they're like, stage 4 cancer, you have 6 months and it's going to be a painful 6 months. I'm on board for that being on the table because I feel like that's giving somebody dignity.
Or how about dementia? Right? Like maybe they're not in physical pain, right? So that's, I guess, another kind of facet to this is dementia, the person is not going to necessarily die from dementia, right? They're going to die from complications from dementia. Their body's going to be weakened and they're going to die from something else.
They'll forget how to breathe. Yeah.
Right, whatever the case is. And Lewy body dementia, it's a painful thing and it can go really fast. I mean, if people are diagnosed with dementia, they should be able to choose that for themselves. And there has to be a point, though, where they're not mentally competent enough to do that. At what point is that? I'm not sure. But I know personally, if I was diagnosed with like early onset, I wouldn't want to be a burden like that, not knowing who my family was. I wouldn't.
It's very sad. I mean, like I worked in a dementia unit in a nursing home for a little while, and that's when I learned early on that when I went into social work, I could not do nursing home social work because you have to be a certain type of person to be able to do it. It is very, very sad. It has its moments where, that you're having fun and you're shooting the shit with them, but it's sad.
Mostly sad. It's very depressing. Absolutely. Yeah. I unfortunately have lost four people in the last 3 years to dementia.
That's a lot.
And I knew them for 12 years. It was a lot. Listen, dementia sucks. And like,
Yes.
not to compare it, but I think it's worse than cancer. Like, at least with cancer, you have a fighting chance. Like, dementia ruins everything. It ruins everything. And it like really takes a toll on the people around you, and like
It steals what makes you human, essentially. You know what I mean? Like the things that make you a human are like your interactions and your memories and everything, and it steals every aspect of that.
Yeah. And the progression of it is always there's no way of knowing.
Yeah, and something that I find really interesting, so I work in long-term care and I've been working quite often on our memory care unit, so working really closely with people that have dementia. Is different how it affects them. Some of them are walking around, right? They're walking around like if you saw them from far away, you wouldn't know that they have dementia. They're still able to dress themselves and, feed themselves. And then there's other people who can't, we're feeding them, we're doing everything for them. And it's just interesting to me. The difference is what dementia decides to rob from one person, it may not rob from another. Some people go very quickly, some people don't. I mean, it's never good.
no, you're absolutely right. It's wild how different and like all the varying ways that it affects people. So what are some other situations where assisted suicide or death with dignity would be appropriate?
I mean, it's still so subjective. What is appropriate.
What about a traumatic brain injury? How do we feel about that?
Well,
Right.
TBIs, there's a whole community of people that are living lives with quality after their traumatic brain injury. Obviously they have limitations and their independence is limited, but there is life after
Yeah.
TBI.
You know, I think it varies person to person because one person can have, this type of injury or illness, and another person can have the same one, but how it affects them internally and mentally is completely different person to person.
Absolutely. It's very individual. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it,
think the biggest, when you think of dying with dignity or physician-assisted suicide, I think you think cancer is probably number one, ALS, excuse me, is another one, where you're very aware of everything that's happening and just slowly your body is just unable to survive. I mean, your body's just kind of essentially dying. There's other sorts of diseases like multiple sclerosis where your body's kind of deteriorating. So I think those are maybe lesser known ones we think about.
well, and that's the thing is like multiple sclerosis is one of those ones. It affects everybody so differently. I have seen people who it progresses very fast, they can't walk, they need a wheelchair. And then there's
Right.
people who get, their treatments and they live a fairly normal life.
Yeah.
Like same with lupus. It can either be very low or it can be you need
Right.
you know, organ transfer from
Donation,
it.
transplant. Yeah. Transplant.
Transplant, that's what I'm looking for. Um, or it can be you can, get treatment and live a fairly normal life. It's so hard to see. They could be for a significant amount of time, they could be normal, and then out of nowhere, it just takes a turn.
A friend of mine moved to Florida recently after she retired from the agency that I work at. And she has MS. And it was passing really quickly, and her brain lesions were growing, or there were more of them. I'm not really sure how it works, but I do know that the last time I saw her, she was walking. She was walking with trouble, but she was walking. And now that she's not really walking at all. So it's real wild how it can affect you. My friend is her quality of life is affected by it, and she talks about it. She's not happy about it. I would never think that she would think of something like this,
Mm-hmm.
but if she would think of something like this, I would understand why she would think of something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You would support her.
I would. I would, because I see her pain and her struggles, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's just some pain that medical care can't fix. We're not there yet. We're just, if you think about how far we've come in medical treatment in the last 100 years, it's truly amazing. But at the same time, we don't have cures for everything. We don't have ways to take away pain that doesn't necessarily make people just bedridden. And where is their quality of life?
Yeah. I mean, the more medication that you're giving someone, typically pain medication, the more they're like sleeping, that's
Yeah.
kind of that's the trade-off. So you're controlling their pain, but I mean, what quality of life are you giving them? And like personally, I've cared for people that have died from cancer, from congestive heart failure, from emphysema, all those, they're all kind of slow process. There's morphine, which helps, and there's other drugs that can help to relax them, calm their anxiety. But it's still not. It's not. They're not dying with dignity when they're dying like that. And
Are
there's
they
only
there?
so much the medicine can do. Yeah, they're not. They're really not. And there's times when someone is actively dying, and they're not aware of the world anymore, and this can last for days.
I mean, watching my grandmother die, if she had that option, I would have supported her because seeing the terror in her eyes
Yeah.
that was terrifying for me to see the terror in her eyes.
Probably
Like
traumatic
and
too.
I can't imagine what she was going through, like knowing that you're dying and like you're screaming for help and nothing
And
can
you
be
can't
done.
breathe. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of, on the flip side of that, in one of the documentaries that I watched, he follows a few different people, and one of the people that he follows is this older gentleman who's dying from cancer. I can't remember what kind, but he is very adamant that he wants to die with dignity, and he wants his family very involved in that process. He says many times that he wants to go out with a party, and he ends up trying treatment a little bit longer than he wanted to, like for the sake of his family. But then towards the end, he has like a really honest conversation with his wife, and he says, I've stayed this long for you. If it were my choice, I would have gone a while ago. And she gets really upset, and she feels sorry because she doesn't want him to hang on just for her. So
Mm.
the day that
Yeah.
he chooses, everybody comes over. They're drinking champagne. They're playing his favorite music. He takes the medication. They're all telling him these wonderful affirmations. I love you, Dad. You were such a wonderful dad. Dad, my favorite memory is this. And I don't want to compare these two things, but if you think of like when we take our animals, right, when they're suffering and we put them to sleep, and we sometimes we go in the room with them and we're saying these loving things, and they go out surrounded by love, and it's like, why don't we do that for people?
Right. Like, I mean, thinking about like our family dog, what did we do that day? We went to the park. We got her
Right.
McDonald's. It was the food she shouldn't have.
Right.
All the things that celebrate.
Right.
And we don't do that for people.
And I think we should. I think that in some cases it's appropriate, and I think we should.
Yeah. I definitely know that in some cultures that older people don't want to be the burden to their children or their grandchildren.
Yeah.
So,
Who does? I mean, who wants to be a burden to their family, financially or in any other way? So there's kind of a question that I've been thinking about that kind of goes along with all of this. You were talking about how you would support your friend. And so I thought about how, like, as social workers, we would support people in their decision, or like help the families kind of come to terms with that decision.
yeah, absolutely. There should be like several meetings surrounding this. I
I
think
mean,
physician assisted suicide should totally be a team of professionals assisted suicide, definitely.
social workers can also play a big role when it comes to like a family's religion, a family's background, a family's, I mean, even the tools that a family will need outside the person who's dying. So the family's probably going to need access to certain types of groups. Coming to terms with a social worker can play a role in this in so many different ways, because it may be a decision that a client makes with or without their family, but at the end of the day, the family's going to be a part of it.
That kind of ties into religion and how that can affect people's views, right? I'm not Catholic by any means, so I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I know in Catholicism, taking your own life is considered like the biggest sin you can commit. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, the
So,
unforgivable
right.
sin. Yeah.
So if you're Catholic, but you have cancer and you're suffering and you want to do this, I mean, what are the implications of that, really? And I don't even know the answer, honestly.
I think that like the Catholic religion definitely takes it seriously. Like, would a priest even come in for you? Like, it would be up for debate that,
Yeah.
I don't have a religious belief, but I was brought up Catholic. My whole family is Catholic, and yeah, that's a huge thing, is somebody taking their own life. However, I have attended funerals where somebody committed suicide who was a Catholic belief, and a priest still holds the services, and they they still talk about the person in celebration of life, who they were.
They're sensitive to the family. Oh,
At least the ones I've been to. But at the same time, I mean, it's your own belief. If you feel like you're making the right choice, then I think that your God is probably on your side.
how do you know if you're going to make the right choice? How do
I
you
don't think you
know?
do. I don't think you do, but I think at the end of the day, like we're all out here just trying to do the best that we can. And I would hope that as somebody who's not religious, I have my beliefs. I would like to believe that my relationship with whatever God that I believe in is a personal one. I would hope that everyone just kind of maybe comes to terms with it in their own way. Like, hey, God, this is a choice I'm making. Like, I hope you support it. This is what I got to do, you know?
Yeah.
Again, dying with dignity.
Yeah.
So our next question is, how do we determine who has the capacity to choose assisted suicide? Now, does this mean, like, who is the person that says you're allowed to and you're not, or
I think it's more of like, what is somebody's mental capacity to make that choice for themselves?
okay.
And I
Yeah.
think that there has to be, I don't know, a test, I guess. Would there be like a test? Obviously they have to be able to understand the implications. Some questions like, do you understand that if you take this medication, what it's going to do? And the person should be able to answer, it's going to end my life. Do you understand that there's no coming back from this? There has to be some other questions, I think, thrown in there, but those would probably be the most important ones as long as they understand what's happening to them.
It kind of reminds me of like DNRs though,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
DNR,
Very similar for sure.
because that kind of is signing your own.
Right. You're just saying, instead of you saying, if anything happens to me, don't bring me back, you're saying, I'm going to take something that's going to end my life and don't bring me back.
I think that there's going to always be factors with the decision making. I think there should probably be multiple evaluations of some sort, but I
Right.
think that we're always going to have trouble with is the case of youth.
Hmm.
Oh,
And
yeah.
honestly, I don't even know where to start with that because
Yeah. That's a really
nobody wants
hard topic.
to die.
I don't want to call it miracles, but things that you can't explain have happened. People have woken up from a coma after 7 years. People
Oh, for
have,
sure. Children that have cancer, their scans show all this cancer, and then something happens and they don't have the cancer anymore.
yeah. So it's like
It's
when I don't know about those decisions when it comes to kids, like, because
I
then what if,
Well, and really, I don't think a child would ever at a certain age, like a 5-year-old, they're not going to be able to say like, I understand that if I take this medication I'm not coming back. They don't understand the finality of death. So I don't know at what age they would understand that. It'd have to be older. I think like, a teenager is probably like the youngest that I personally would feel comfortable having them make that decision, honestly.
I
I don't
mean,
know. I almost want to argue that. I feel like a child with a terminal illness that's been in and out of the hospital, that's been surrounded by other kids with terminal illness, that's have had friends that have died and have not come back, might have a different idea of death and what it is and its finality.
Okay. I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually brought this topic up with Andrew because I couldn't answer it, but at the same time I thought about it. I was like, what if it was my daughter? Like, what if my daughter was 15 years old? She had stage 4 cancer of some sort, and you know, that that was her wish. Like, do I respect this?
And that's hard.
It's hard because
As a
like,
parent, I don't know. I don't know because as a parent,
because
it's
like,
like
Bro, I'm not even a parent and I'd be like, no.
it's ingrained
oh,
in
it's
you. Like
hard.
your
No.
your maternal instinct is to keep your child alive. So I
Right.
It
can't.
is. It's so hard for me because like my whole life I've always told Andrew if it ever gets to the point where you have to pull the plug, pull the fucking plug, please. Like, do
Right.
not. But at the same time, like when I think about it as my kid, I'm like, because I know my mother, she would never pull a plug. I'm like, Andrew, you need to pull the plug because my mom will intervene at all costs not to pull the fucking plug.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's just something with being a mom where you're like, if we respect adults to make these type of decisions for themselves. And it comes back to me like little people not having a voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's like,
It's hard, man. That's a hard one.
it's hard.
This has been a super sad kind of episode, but it doesn't have to be. And, dying with dignity is not a sad thing. Just like Brianne mentioned before, like having all of your loved ones around you and that support and that love. Death is not always a bad or a sad thing. It could be a good thing.
Compassionate, yeah.
Yeah.
When I did my best dress, then we have a party. Give me a drink.
That's right. Yeah.
In my culture, my Hispanic culture, funerals and wakes and celebrations of death are definitely more of a party, more of a memorial,
Yeah. Celebrating their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
I like that.
I
Yeah.
hope when I go out, people are saying their favorite memories, and I hope some of them are like wildly inappropriate, and then everybody laughs, and that's what I want. Nothing more than that.
Right. No, seriously. In the back of my mind, like I know that I will have lived a good life if there are, a million people at my funeral. But like, how will I ever know?
You won't.
I'll never know.
Yeah.
Always said like I wanted to die at a concert, like a show that I've always wanted to see. Like, let me die there. Like,
I want to go out like The Notebook, spooning with the love of my life,
oh my goodness.
Oh.
quietly in our sleep, just snuggling.
Would you choose assisted suicide for yourself?
Yes.
Yes. If it came to a point where I was in enough pain and the rest of my life wasn't going to be good, absolutely.
What about you, Ava?
I don't know. I don't know if I can make that decision just in a podcast episode.
I got you. You need a little bit more time. Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie, like tonight has been the very first time I've ever thought about this. So
yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right, ladies. I just want to say I would love to see people in the comments saying like their thoughts. Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? Would you choose it for yourself? Like, what kinds of situations do you like? Kind of the questions that we've asked. Feel free to answer them in the comments, even if you don't agree with us.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be doing a live on TikTok, so we might even come back with a part 2 depending on the feedback we get from that.
I have a quote to end our podcast by Jimi Hendrix, rock guitarist.
Yes.
I'm the one that's got to die when it's time for me to die. So let me live my life the way I want to.
Mic drop. Before we depart for the day, we want to remind you that if you have topics you would like to hear about or just have general comments, feel free to reach out and submit those.
Or if you have a topic you want to discuss with us here, reach out. We are always welcoming of making new connections.
Our site is linked below, but please check out our TikTok, our Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube. Talk to you later, everyone, and thanks for listening.
And remember, take care of your future.
Take care of each other.
Take care of yourself.